because I might have an opinion, that meant I was homophobic. No. Let me say publicly. Let me see very publicly. If there was a dude and I had some to say, that's not...
They say in Hollywood and the NBA world, nothing ever stays buried forever. No matter how many years pass, no matter how loud the denials get, the internet always brings the whispers back to life. And tonight, one of the most controversial conversations in sports and entertainment is once again exploding online, involving a Hall of Fame legend, his decades-long personal rumors, and his son who has become just as talked about as he is. Because when Magic Johnson publicly opened up about his past, his relationships, and the moment that changed his life forever, it didn't just shock the world. It opened a door that fans and critics never fully closed. And now, years later, his son EJ Johnson has stepped into the spotlight with his own bold identity, his own viral interviews, and a lifestyle that constantly puts him at the center of online debate. But here's where things get messy. Because internet culture doesn't just observe anymore. It investigates, it connects dots, it creates narratives, and sometimes it builds stories that spread faster than facts ever can. Clips of interviews, old game footage, close friendships, public statements, and resurfaced commentary from comedians and entertainers have all been pulled into one giant storm of speculation and opinion. And when Katt enters the conversation, known for his unfiltered takes on Hollywood, fame, and hidden industry dynamics, you already know the internet is going to explode with reactions. But the real question is this: where does entertainment end and misinformation begin? And why does every generation of fame seem to come with its own set of rumors that never truly die? Because this story isn't just about one family. It's about how fame, perception, and internet culture can reshape reality in real time. And what you're about to hear next is exactly why this debate refuses to go away. The conversation really starts where fame and legacy collide with perception. For decades, Magic Johnson has been more than just an NBA legend. He's been a symbol of excellence, 5 championships, Showtime Lakers, and a personality that helped define an entire era of basketball. But his legacy also took a dramatic turn in 1991, when he shocked the world by announcing that he was HIV positive and stepping away from the game. That moment didn't just change his career, it changed how the public viewed his entire personal life. Suddenly, every rumor, every past headline, every friendship he had on and off the court was re-examined under a microscope. And even though Magic publicly addressed his diagnosis, clarified his personal life, and repeatedly denied the speculation that followed, the internet never fully let go of the narrative. Because in the world of fame, once a story becomes viral, it doesn't really end, it just evolves. Fast forward years later, and the spotlight shifts to his son, EJ Johnson. Unlike most children of athletes who try to stay out of public attention, EJ stepped directly into it. Fashion, reality television, interviews, red carpets. He built a public identity that was bold, expressive, and unapologetically individual. And with that visibility came commentary. Some people admired his confidence. Others, especially online, turned his lifestyle into constant debate. But what really intensified public discussion was how EJ spoke about himself in interviews. He openly discussed identity, attraction, expression, and how he navigates spaces that are often judgmental or restrictive. And while many praised him for honesty, others online turned those clips into talking points for broader cultural arguments. That's where things start to shift from personal identity into internet interpretation. Because social media doesn't just consume information anymore, it remixes it. Old clips of Magic Johnson resurfaced. Interviews from the 90s reappeared. Even harmless moments like his friendship with Isaiah Thomas were clipped, slowed down, zoomed in, and analyzed frame by internet users trying to assign meaning to. Interactions that, at the time, were simply part of NBA culture and camaraderie. Isaiah Thomas and Magic Johnson shared one of the most iconic friendships in basketball history. They played together, trained together, and even joked publicly in ways that reflected closeness typical of elite teammates. In sports culture, especially in that era, physical expressions of friendship, Hugging, joking, celebrating were normal locker room behavior. But online, context often disappears. A hug becomes a theory. A joke becomes a narrative. A moment becomes a clue. And that's exactly how internet discourse begins to spiral. As E.J. Johnson grew into his own public life, his presence only added fuel to ongoing online conversations. His fashion-forward appearances, his confidence in expressing himself, and his viral interviews naturally attracted attention. In some clips, he speaks about confidence, attraction, and how people perceive him in social spaces, especially in nightlife and social environments. Those statements, when taken in isolation and stripped of context, often get reshared with commentary that stretches far beyond what was originally said. And this is where modern internet culture becomes important to understand. We are no longer in an era where people just watch interviews. We are in an era where every sentence is dissected, clipped, reposted, and reinterpreted by thousands of different audiences, each adding their own assumptions, biases, and narratives. So when a public figure like Katt Williams enters the conversation, known for his unfiltered comedy, cultural commentary, and criticism of Hollywood structures, the entire discussion gets amplified. Katt Williams has built a reputation over the years for speaking in metaphor, satire, and controversial observations about the entertainment industry. Whether people agree with him or not, his name alone is enough to trigger viral reactions whenever he is mentioned in relation to celebrities. But what often gets lost in these discussions is the difference between commentary, opinion, and fact. Because once a narrative enters viral circulation, it becomes less about truth and more about engagement. Clips get reposted. Headlines get rewritten. Commentary videos break everything down frame by frame. And suddenly, millions of people are discussing a version of reality that may not fully match the original context. That's the core issue here. Not just what is being said, but how it is being interpreted, shared, and transformed. And in the middle of all of this stands a father and a son, both public figures in their own right, both constantly discussed, and both often turned into symbols in debates far larger than their actual personal lives. Magic Johnson continues to be celebrated for his basketball legacy, business success, and public advocacy work. EJ continues to build his identity in fashion, media, and entertainment spaces. But online, their names often get pulled into larger cultural conversations that go far beyond sports or entertainment. And as those conversations grow louder, one thing becomes clear: the internet doesn't just report stories anymore, it constructs them. Every clip, every interview, every resurfaced moment becomes part of a digital puzzle that people try to solve, even when the original pieces were never meant to fit together that way. And that's exactly why this topic keeps coming back. Not because of new facts, but because of old footage meeting new interpretations. And as we move deeper into this breakdown, the focus shifts from public perception to how these narratives spread so quickly, and why certain stories never seem to disappear, no matter how many times they are addressed or clarified. Because in the world of viral media, the story is never really over. It just waits for the next wave of attention. Because once a narrative becomes part of the internet ecosystem, it doesn't stay still, it mutates. What started as isolated interviews, old sports footage, and personal commentary slowly turned into something much bigger. A digital feedback loop where clips are constantly reinterpreted by new audiences who were never even present when the original moments happened. And in that space, context becomes the first casualty. Magic Johnson's legacy, for example, has always existed on two parallel tracks. On one side, he is celebrated as one of the greatest point guards in NBA history, a businessman who turned his brand into an empire, and a public figure who has openly discussed health struggles and life lessons in interviews and documentaries. On the other side, he has been the subject of decades of speculation and rumor cycles that have resurfaced repeatedly across different generations of internet users. And what makes this cycle unique is not the content itself, but the repetition. Every few years, a clip resurfaces. Every few months, a new commentary video reanalyzes old footage. Every so often, a podcast or influencer brings it back into trending conversation. And each time it returns, it reaches a new audience that wasn't around for the original context. That's how internet mythology is built. Now, when you introduce E.J. Johnson into that equation, the conversation expands even further, not because of anything controversial he has done, but because visibility always invites interpretation. E.J. grew up in a world where being a public figure's child is no longer a private identity. It is a public brand. Every appearance, every interview, every red carpet moment becomes content. And content, once posted, is no longer owned by the subject. It belongs to the internet. So when EJ speaks confidently in interviews about his life, style, and identity, those clips don't just stay within entertainment journalism circles. They get extracted, remixed, reposted, and often reframed by audiences who attach their own meaning to them. Some viewers see confidence. Others see controversy. Some see individuality. Others see narrative confirmation for whatever they already believed. And this is where figures like Katt Williams enter the discussion in a very specific way. Katt Williams is not a journalist, nor a biographer. He is a comedian and cultural commentator whose style relies heavily on exaggeration, metaphor, and critique of entertainment industry structures. His statements are often layered, part humor, part observation, part performance. But in the age of viral clips, nuance doesn't travel well. A 10-second clip can circulate without the surrounding context. A joke can be reposted as a statement. A metaphor can be treated as a literal claim. And once that happens, audiences begin reacting not to what was meant, but to what was clipped. That's how modern controversy cycles accelerate. A single resurfaced moment leads to reaction videos. Reaction videos lead to response videos. Response videos lead to commentary threads. And suddenly, a conversation that began as entertainment analysis turns into a full-scale cultural debate. What's important to understand here is not whether the claims are accurate or not, but how quickly perception replaces verification in online spaces. Because the internet does not wait for confirmation. It reacts first, analyzes later, and sometimes never revisits the original source again. And in that environment, families of public figures often become symbolic reference points rather than private individuals. Magic Johnson represents more than just an athlete in these conversations. He represents legacy, fame, masculinity in sports culture, and the transition from athletic career to public business figure. E.J. Johnson, on the other hand, represents modern visibility, media expression, and the evolution of celebrity identity in the social media age. When both names appear together in online discussions, they are often used less as individuals and more as cultural symbols in broader debates about fame, identity, and perception. But this is where the disconnect happens. Because what is happening online is not always aligned with how people live their actual lives. In reality, Magic Johnson has spent decades building his post-NBA legacy through business ventures, philanthropy, and public advocacy. He has spoken in interviews about family, support, and growth. E.J. Johnson has built his own independent identity in fashion and entertainment, separate from his father's sports legacy. Yet online discourse often ignores that separation, blending both into a single narrative thread that feels more like storytelling than reporting. And storytelling, especially on the internet, tends to prioritize emotional impact over factual accuracy. That's why certain topics never fully disappear. They don't survive because they are proven. They survive because they are engaging. And engagement is the currency of modern media. The more people react, the more the algorithm pushes. The more the algorithm pushes, the more new audiences discover it. And the more new audiences discover it, the more the cycle repeats. This creates a loop where old narratives gain new life not because of new evidence, but because of new attention. Meanwhile, public figures often respond in very different ways. Some choose to address rumors directly. Others ignore them completely. Some rely on interviews to clarify context. Others prefer to let time and credibility speak for itself. But regardless of response strategy, once a narrative reaches a certain level of virality, it becomes difficult to fully erase from public memory. And that is the central tension in this entire discussion. It is not just about what was said, It is about how information evolves once it enters the internet ecosystem. Because once something becomes viral content, it is no longer just a statement. It becomes a product of interpretation, repetition, and audience engagement. And in the case of public figures like Magic Johnson and E.J. Johnson, that means their names will continue to circulate in conversations that are often far larger than the original context of any interview, clip, or commentary. Which brings us back to the bigger question at the center of all of this. Are we watching real stories unfold, or are we watching the internet rewrite them in real time? Because in today's digital world, perception doesn't just follow reality. Sometimes it replaces it entirely. Because once a story reaches this level of circulation, it stops being just about the individuals involved and starts becoming about what the audience believes they represent. At this point in the conversation, the internet is no longer reacting to a single interview, a single clip, or a single moment. It is reacting to an entire constructed narrative ecosystem built over decades of resurfaced footage, commentary videos, opinion pieces, and social media reinterpretations. And that ecosystem is self-sustaining. Every time a clip of Magic Johnson or E.J. Johnson resurfaces, it doesn't exist in isolation. It is immediately placed into a pre-existing framework of beliefs that viewers already carry. Some see legacy, some see controversy, some see inspiration, and others see confirmation of narratives they have been exposed to for years. That is why these discussions rarely resolve, they evolve. Now, stepping back into reality, what often gets lost in these viral cycles is the distinction between public identity and private life. Magic Johnson, beyond all internet commentary, is a businessman, a father, and a public figure who has repeatedly addressed his past and focused on building a legacy far beyond basketball. His public interviews over the years consistently emphasize family support, growth, and responsibility. E.J. Johnson, similarly, exists as an individual who has carved out his own identity in fashion, entertainment, and media. His presence in interviews and public appearances reflects a modern form of celebrity, where self-expression is central and personal branding is part of public life. But in the digital space, those separate identities often get merged into a single narrative thread, especially when old controversies and resurfaced clips enter the algorithm again. And once that happens, the story becomes less about truth and more about engagement. This is where commentary culture, reaction videos, and viral breakdown channels play a major role. Not because they create the original content, but because they amplify it, reinterpret it, and redistribute it in emotionally charged formats designed for attention. A clip becomes a headline becomes a theory becomes a discussion, and a discussion becomes a trend. By the time it reaches millions of viewers, the original context is often several layers removed. And that distance creates space for speculation. In many cases, public figures become symbols in debates they never directly asked to be part of. Their names become attached to broader cultural conversations about fame, identity, masculinity, media representation, and generational change in entertainment. That is why discussions involving Magic Johnson and E.J. Johnson often extend far beyond sports or celebrity culture. They become part of a larger internet conversation about how society interprets visibility. Because in today's world, visibility is not neutral. It is constantly analyzed, constantly reinterpreted, and constantly repackaged for different audiences. And when figures like Katt are added into the discourse, whether through old interviews, resurfaced comedy clips, or commentary segments, the narrative becomes even more complex. Not because new facts are introduced, but because tone, satire, and metaphor are often mistaken for literal interpretation in online spaces. This is one of the defining challenges of modern media literacy, separating entertainment language from factual reporting. And without that separation, narratives can quickly become distorted. But beyond all the commentary, there is a deeper truth that often gets overshadowed by viral debates. Public figures are still human beings. They live with the consequences of fame in ways that are rarely visible in short clips or reaction videos. Their families experience attention they did not necessarily choose. Their words get reanalyzed years later in completely different cultural contexts. And their personal lives often become discussion points for audiences who only see fragments of the full picture. That gap between perception and reality is where most online controversies live. And it is also where misunderstandings grow. Because the internet rewards certainty, even when the underlying topic is complex, incomplete, or emotionally charged. A confident opinion spreads faster than a careful explanation. A bold claim spreads faster than a balanced breakdown. And a dramatic narrative spreads faster than nuance. That's why stories like this resurface again and again. Not because they are new, but because they are resonant. They tap into larger questions audiences are already asking about fame, identity, and the price of visibility in the modern entertainment world. But as this breakdown comes to a close, one thing becomes clear. The real story here is not just about one family, one interview, or one viral clip. It is about how the internet constructs meaning out of fragments. It is about how audiences interpret identity through selective exposure. And it is about how easily narratives can expand far beyond their original context once they enter the digital spotlight. So when people revisit these discussions, the most important question is not what was said in a clip, but what was added to it in the retelling. Because in the age of viral media, the line between information and interpretation is thinner than ever. And once that line blurs, the story never truly ends. It just keeps getting rewritten. And that brings us to the end of today's breakdown, but the conversation is nowhere near over. Because stories like this don't just disappear when the video ends, they continue in comment sections, on social media, and across every platform where people are still trying to make sense of what they've seen, heard, and interpreted. Now I want you to think about something for a second. In a world where every interview clip can be replayed, every old moment can resurface, and every public figure can be reanalyzed years later, do we actually understand the full story anymore, or are we just reacting to fragments? That's the real question behind everything we covered today. So I want to hear from you directly. Speech Balloon, do you think modern internet culture helps us understand celebrities better, or does it distort reality into something unrecognizable? Speech Balloon, and where do you personally draw the line between public curiosity and private life? Drop your opinion in the comments below, because this topic always divides people, and I want to see where you stand. If you enjoyed this deep dive breakdown, make sure you don't leave without doing 3 things. Thumbs up, hit the like button if you want more detailed storytelling videos like this, bell, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next viral breakdown, pushpin, turn on notifications because the next story might be even bigger than this one, and most importantly, share this video with someone who loves celebrity analysis, hip-hop culture debates, or internet controversy breakdowns. Because the more we break these stories down properly, the more we separate fact from speculation and entertainment from assumption. We'll be back soon with another deep dive. Until then, stay aware, stay critical, and don't believe everything you see online at first glance.